Broker Bulletin acknowledges the traditional custodians of all the lands across the country on which we record our podcast and pays its respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome to the Broker Bulletin podcast, where better begins. Join us as we chat with brokers about what's working for them, what drives them, and the real challenges and wins that matter most right now.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm Luke Jarmaine, the LMG's Chief Risk Officer here at LMG. Joining me today is Mel Cooney, our Manager of Broker Compliance Consulting. If you're in the network, you definitely know Mel, either from her direct help or from the fact that her family can reportedly define a credit guide from memory because she talks about them so much. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you, Luke. Actually, fun fact, my kids now know from broker questions that often get asked while we're driving to and from school. They'll be like, yes, you need to resend a game plan. Yeah. So that is actually a true story.
Love it. That's fantastic. Well, I think we titled today's episode, The Costs of Non-Compliance and Compliance by Design. I want to be straight out of the gate here, direct. This isn't about being alarming. It's about being incredibly honest. We just wrapped up Compliance Flagship Week, and I think we got over 2,000 brokers tuned in, Mel.
We did. It was a huge week.
I think that tells us exactly where the industry's head is at. People want to know what the stakes are and what they need to do differently.
Exactly. It's not a back office conversation anymore. It's front of mind.
Love it. But let's give the macro view. We are operating in the most intensive regulatory environment this industry has ever seen. Lenders are active. The independent ag assurance program is doing deep dives that simply didn't exist a couple of years ago. When they assessed LMG, they explicitly commended our MyCRM platform, the live key risk indicator dashboards that we have, brokerversity training, and our game plan documents. Those aren't just boxes to tick. That's what a highly functional compliance system looks like.
This is all great validation, Luke, but let's be real. Brokers are running complex businesses. They're chasing leads, managing rate shifts, keeping customers happy, handling staff. So when we do a compliance update, it often feels like a heavy brick on them and on top of workload that's already weighting them down. I
completely hear that. Mel, and honestly, if compliance is experienced strictly as a burden imposed from the outside, then we've probably failed in how we've built it. My perspective is that, compliance should never be a cost center on the Friday afternoon interruption department. Done right, compliance, I think, is going to be a competitive edge for our brokers and their clients. It protects your accreditation, which is your literal license to trade. It makes you the trusted partner lenders want to send complex files through.
So true. The proactive businesses, the ones who are actually investing in their compliance posture before they're forced to, they always emerge stronger when the environment tightens.
And make no mistake, the environment is tightening right now. Investigation volumes hit record highs late last year, and they've continued on throughout 2026, heavily driven by digital fraud. Lenders are suspending and terminating accreditations aggressively, sometimes without even waiting for our internal reviews to finish. And those calls are final.
So this episode isn't about making people freak out and look for the regulator under their beds. This is about building preparation and files that speaks for themselves so clearly that if someone asks you how you verified an income, the file answers that question before you've even opened your mouth. So let's break down how we actually do that.
Love it. Let's jump straight to the practical side then. Mel, you speak to brokers every day. What are the major compliance misconceptions you're having to actively bust right now?
Well, where do I start? Let's lead with the classic. But Mel, the lender didn't ask for that on their checklist. I love this one. Your smoke alarm doesn't actually ask for anything until the kitchen's on fire either. But the NCCP and your responsible lending obligations under my friend RG209 don't shrink just because a lender has streamlined their own document checklist. You have an independent duty to make reasonable inquiries, verify, and keep records.
Okay, Mel, let me look at some of these myths that we've got written down here, some of the common ones that we hear, and then how about you hit me with a reality stick? So the first one, the lender didn't ask for it.
You still need to fulfill your obligations as a credit rep under our license. So regardless of what the lender checklist says, you follow our checklist.
But it's a commercial spot and refer loan.
Well, under your accreditation with that lender, you still have obligations of due diligence. Even though NCCP doesn't apply, you still will have some due diligence that you needed to have done before you send that loan to the bank.
How about my admin can handle the advice?
Oh, well, the admin isn't a licensed broker. So no, admins can't. There is an admin and they have an absolute proper role and function within a broker business. But just like Peter Parker said, great power comes great responsibility. And that's what brokers have. So they are the ones solely responsible for giving credit assistance.
Let's jump a bit more, continue down the practical side, Mel. When you speak to brokers every day, what are the major compliance misconceptions you're having to actively bust right now?
Probably more things around how to articulate game plans and, again, that space around what lenders need and what we need. So our answer to that is with how to articulate game plans. Obviously, we have MyCRM intelligence that breaks down all of the NCCP requirements that is needed to communicate the credit assistance to the customer. And again, around that misconception of what a lender doesn't need, we absolutely do as the licensee.
Let's talk about a specific compliance gap we've seen in the internal data. So credit guides. Why is this hitting the radar so heavily?
So credit guides, usually what we see is sometimes a broker may add borrower 2 after only the first borrower had applied. So as per following the process, the broker will have sent out the Hello Pack, which has the credit guide already embedded in that document. But if a second borrower was added, maybe just the singular privacy consent was sent to the borrower, not the full Hello Pack. So the credit guide does need to be sent to all brokers as soon as it's immediately looking like that they're going to borrow money. So that's a step that's often missed. The reason why we're doing such a blitz on it at the moment is to keep our brokers safe. We regularly will do key risk indicator reports across our whole portfolio at LMG to identify anything that we're seeing trending. We're framing up and talking to brokers about why that's important and mitigating any issues that we may have seen.
The final piece of the puzzle is probably thinking about team structure. So what do you think the line is between an incredible administrative assistant and a broker?
So an incredible administrative assistant is like your shadow. So they can often help your client, they can follow up documents, they can help you package the deal as far as what is required to be uploaded. But that piece where you're building that relationship with your customer is solely in the broker's world. You need the customer's trust. You need to be the one being that absolute advisor because you're the one who's licensed to give credit advice. So sure, your admin can absolutely help your customer with following up documents and, oh, hey, I'll get Luke on that appointment for real soon. But the real line in the sand is credit assistance, and that's 100% the broker's job.
Your obligations follow you, not your checklist. Protect the client, protect the accreditation, protect your business. Simple.
Very simple. So, Luke, you mentioned earlier that lender investigation volumes have spiked dramatically towards the end of last year, which created a bit of a backlog here at LMG just before the holidays. How are we now managing that wave here at LMG?
Good question, Mel. Look, we've deployed targeted heavy resourcing to help us clear the backlog. But the key takeaway for everyone listening is why the volumes have spiked. So the vast majority of these cases at the moment are lender-driven. Lenders aren't just doing surface reviews anymore. They're analysing entire business relationships, mapping linked intermediaries, so your referrers, and tracking the physical trail of funds. The lenders are investing a lot more into their technology and their people and their processes to identify the supporting docs that clients are finding, and they're quick to send us down the alerts to investigate.
And I guess that triggers a domino effect, right?
Chain reaction effect, absolutely. If lender A catches an issue and revokes a broker's accreditation, it triggers automatic reviews across the rest of the panel. The stakes currently couldn't be higher.
And so let's talk about the fuel behind this fire. It's fraud, and specifically highly sophisticated digital manipulation. So what are our investigators actually seeing on the ground?
Look, I think a lot of it is driven by a lot more accessible digital tools and AI. So we're seeing incredibly polished, staged salary arrangements, false loan purposes, and altered payslips or tax records, where the document has been scanned specifically to scrub out forensic markers. The catch is that now lenders are deploying AI-driven tools to detect these mismatches instantly. The second their system flags an anomaly, the lender's very first question to us is, what did the broker do to verify this document? And can you prove that the source was from the client and not the broker?
So that is exactly why file notes and rigorous, consistent process for brokers are the absolute best line of defense. A rock-solid, identical process for every single client actually proves that the broker did their job. They made reasonable inquiries. They weren't a passive participant in someone else's scam. The brokers caught in the crosshairs are almost always the ones who just let time pressure or a slick lender product shortcut their verification steps. So don't be that broker.
Exactly. From an aggregate level, LMG is moving away from a reactive stance. We are heavily investing in data science and engineering for our proactive fraud detection project to spot risk patterns in real time. We're also scaling the compliance team with offshore admin staff to ensure our local consultants can focus on defending our complex cases for our brokers.
So, Luke, you mentioned just before about the huge spikes in lenders' investigations. Maybe just give us a quick summary on what you think those drivers are and what are we doing to combat that?
I think lenders are our key triggers for investigations, and their key triggers are usually they're identifying problems in supporting documents. They've invested a lot, I think, since November last year. We've probably seen unprecedented amount of investigations that we're getting. And that's then led to us, we've kind of expanded the team to support that level of investigation. We're investing in our tools and resources to look at how we can scan and better identify fraud in those supporting documents. And some of the learnings is that we're spending a lot more time looking at broker records and note-taking and making sure that all the advice that they've done is standalone, and the processes that they followed to collect those documents from the client meant that where there was actually fraud, it was clearly demonstrable that it was client-led fraud and that the brokers weren't complicit in any of it.
So I guess brokers probably would be really scared knowing that there's all this AI-driven fraud, and it's sometimes really hard to detect. Even on files that I've looked at, it's very hard to detect. And we often say to brokers, your record keeping and your process is your best defense. So if we kind of think about that on what we're doing on our side, and you mentioned how we're trying to scale our team and build in those processes internally. So I guess some advice for brokers around how do you can't fraud proof because it's kind of everywhere, but what things should they absolutely not negotiate in building out processes?
You definitely need to focus on the process. Make sure that you can demonstrate where and how you collected these documents. Make sure that you're taking the time to know your client, meet your client, kind of conversation with your client. Make sure that you know who they say they are and what they're putting in front of you is demonstrable and valid.
And referrers too, right? So referrers are often an extension of a broker business. So knowing that referral arrangement is often critical. Sometimes we do see that that's where that seepage of poor information comes in, and you just accept it because of that's the relationship you've built with whoever it is. So that due diligence with those referral arrangements is critical. Would you agree?
100%. I think referrers probably one of the hottest topics across the industry at the moment with the industry bodies, regulators, lenders and ourselves, and how do we get better kind of telemetry and monitoring of the use of referrers in the network. But referrers more than ever, I think, are going to be looked at closely, especially where they're providing attestations for self-employed people and the salary they're making from it. I think now more than ever, brokers need to make sure that they know their referrers and they trust their referrers, and the kind of the documentation, especially the income verification, is they're happy to stand behind what's being provided to them. I think a lot of the investigations that we've seen that have been closely linked to fraud have been around that self-employed. The accountant referrer has been the most topical, and that's what we've got to make sure that we're working with our brokers to stay on top of.
It sounds like a bad joke, right? Like a solicitor, an accountant, a buyer's agent and a broker all walk into a bar and then fraud came out.
And then fraud came out.
Where I see it as well is in that instinct. So we talked before about, what is that definitive line between an admin and the broker? And as an experienced broker, you know your customer. You know their kids' names, you know their dogs' names, you know what kind of expenses they have in the account. That's where that instinct of all that embedded knowledge of looking at so many applications really comes to the fore. Because if something was referred into you and the information just doesn't match up, your instinct would be clanging loud and clear, it's a trap. Get out. So that's where it's absolutely critical around brokers understanding their role and not letting someone else take the responsibility for that.
Mel, you talk to brokers every day and you get involved with a lot of our investigations, given that you know some of these businesses so well. What are some curly ones that you'd be happy to share?
So the really hard ones is particularly where the broker hasn't been aware of that document generation and often will pick it up because of, some quirky font. So one that I saw, instead of being a comma to separate the numbers in a notice of assessment, it was incorrectly mistyped as a full stop. that was enough for us to understand that there was fraud and that document had been generated. We know to look for that as a team who's been trained in it, but often those little minute details get missed when you're doing massive scale in a broker's office. So I think that's a hard conversation for me to have because I do have the relationship with our brokers, knowing how hard they work on a file. Those things can be missed, but now in today's environment, just sorry, I was busy is not good enough. It's about that process and keeping to the process for each and every file. That's where it's important.
We touched on the commercial spot and refers a bit earlier, and also there, I think some of those investigations that led to some lender termination accreditations, that was not during the due diligence on the files as part of the spot and refer. What do you think of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a long time there's been this almost trust in relationships that you build with often different lenders, and then having the relationship where the lender will say, oh, no, don't worry about that, I'll take care of it for you. But in the terms and conditions, it does say that as part of the accreditation, the broker does have that due diligence responsibility. And I think the awareness that often sometimes brokers have, particularly in that grey commercial space, that isn't widespread known. So that was a hard conversation also to have in that area because it was such an embedded practice across so many different broker groups that, you know, the trust was put there, and then obviously responsible lending came in or the due diligence in the commercial aspect, and we just can't have that.
Let's pivot to the solution, Mel, and how MyCRM we try to use to flip the script. Most aggregators treat risk a bit like as a series of manual checkboxes at the very end of a deal. We wanted to completely change that paradigm with what we call compliance by design. But Mel, you live and breathe this tech. Break down what that actually means, because we say it a lot, and I'm not sure we always explain really well what compliance by design means when we talk MyCRM.
I think the thing is our industry is heavily regulated. That's a lot when you're trying to run a business, manage multiple clients. So compliance by design is essentially breaking down those regulatory requirements, the must-haves, into simple steps. So we basically follow the MyCRM way. So check out Brokerversity. We've got loads of stuff and information around what that practice is. So it's following steps along the natural journey of a loan process, which will, at the start, your Hello book takes care of those two requirements, your privacy consent and your credit guide. So that's the first in the journey for your customer, but also for you as your broker. And then the discovery phase where you use your fact find to collect the information from your client. That's part of the compliance by design process. All of those questions have been designed with responsible lending in mind. And then we move to goal setter. So that's building out your bid regulation requirements. So RG273 for anyone writing that one down. That's how you're understanding what your customers' now reasons are, what their goals are, and then understanding also any foreseeable future problems. So the goal setter tool actually takes you through what questions to ask your clients. So you're absolutely covering that. And then we have our game plans. That's where the real nitty gritty is to demonstrate the broker has fulfilled their bid requirements in recommending a product to the customer that has been in their best interest. So those tools leading up to that actually helps fill in the game plan, which is then covering all of that legislation. So if you had to unpack that all and design a process by yourself, I think it would be really overwhelming. So compliance by design is naturally us here at LMG thinking about tech solutions that help you stay in front of the regulation, but making it a very simple, easy to follow, unforgettable process. Because if you forget one step, it often means real impact to your customer or fines or you missing legislation, which is absolutely not okay.
Actually sounds like it makes the job easier.
It 100% does. Not only does it make your job easier, it makes you more efficient because, as you know, whenever you follow a step and you do it once and do it right, then it makes the job easier. But also for your customer, it gives them an A-grade experience. You're not then having to go back and ask for documents. They're being presented with a lovely branded portfolio of what they are and who they are and what they're looking for. So it is suiting everyone's needs.
What a feature list. Integrated bid workflows, responsible lending, automated expense categorization, dynamic credit guides, digital game plan acceptance, MyCRM intelligence. And we aren't just stopping there. What's the next evolution do you think is going to come into MyCRM?
Well, we've been talking about My Documents and it's just on the precipice of being released. I'm really excited about it because it makes collecting documents less of a chore for our brokers. It's absolutely fundamental as part of the loan application process. So often we find there might be missing information that's often discovered after the game plan. So those documents are held in a G drive or, God forbid, an email. And then when we go to audit the file, those things are missing. So by having my documents there and being a very easy to pull from a drive or a centralized place where brokers can keep their documents, it helps us when we have to audit a file, when there's an investigation, it's all there. It's a source of truth. And I think as my documents evolve, it absolutely will help us combating those fraud things we talked about earlier. But I think it really makes it uniform. We have brokers have all these creative names for their file documents, which makes it hard for us to understand. But for the broker as well, if they do subsequent files for their clients, you may not know what file you called something, and then that takes time again. So our absolute motivation is to save our brokers time and keep them safe. And all of these tech solutions absolutely do that.
And auto TFN redaction.
Oh, don't forget about TFN. If I had $1 for every time I had to tell a broker to redact TFN, I wouldn't have to work full time. It's on every file, and it's probably one of the oldest legislation pieces, and we still haven't got it right. So that is going to be a huge time saver for everyone.
What are your key takeaways, Mel?
I think my key takeaways is use the tools at your disposal. They're there to keep you safe. They're there to save you time. They're there to deliver an A-grade experience to your customer. With the changing landscape in compliance and the regulation, I think it's absolutely no better time for brokers to establish that well-known process so that they can repeat and scale, but that's doing their record-keeping obligations. That's there to keep them safe.
Mel, I think my key takeaway is compliance is more and more important. It can be a differentiator for the way you keep your business safe. It's definitely a differentiator in the way that your client perceives you. And it's something that we're going to continue to try to lead the way on, both in how we embed it into our technology platforms, how we lead the conversations in the industry, and how we work with our customers to provide the best outcomes. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you like this episode, make sure you rate it and follow us in your favorite pod store. And if you know a broker who would make a guest, have a topic you want us to discuss, or even have a question you'd love for us to answer, you can DM us at lmg.broker on Instagram, or send us an email at brokerbulletin@lmg.broker. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Broker Bulletin. We would hate for you to miss an episode. Subscribe to Broker Bulletin in your favourite podcast app. Has this episode been helpful? We'd love you to rate and review us. It'll help us deliver content that's useful to you and help others discover us. If you have great ideas for topics worth tackling, or have burning questions you'd like addressed on an upcoming episode, reach out. Links in the show notes. See you next time.